My grandmother left me one thing before she died. Not her jewelry. Not any money. Not one of the quilts everyone in the family fought over after the funeral. She left me a small wooden box. At the time, I thought it was a sweet gesture. By the end of that year, I realized it was the reason my entire family had spent decades pretending certain memories never happened. My name is Hannah, and this happened 3 years ago. I still have the box. I still haven't told most of my family what I eventually found inside it. And sometimes I wonder if Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she left it to me. My grandmother Eleanor passed away just after Thanksgiving. She was 86. The kind of grandmother who always had fresh cookies ready before you even knocked on her front door. The kind who remembered every birthday, every graduation, every heartbreak. She wasn't rich. She never pretended to be. But she had this quiet confidence that made everyone listen whenever she spoke. She'd raised my mom mostly by herself after my grandfather died young. At least, that's what I'd always been told. After the funeral, the family gathered at Grandma's house one last time before it was sold. My Aunt Carol and my mother were sorting through photo albums. My cousins were arguing over old Christmas ornaments. I was helping pack books into boxes when Mr. Collins, Grandma's attorney, walked into the living room. "Hannah?" "Yeah?" "Your grandmother asked me to give you something personally." He reached beneath the table and picked up a small wooden box. It wasn't fancy, maybe 8 inches wide. Dark oak, worn smooth from age. A tiny brass latch held it closed. No lock, no label, nothing special. At least that's what I thought. "This belonged to your grandmother for many years." He handed it to me carefully. "She specifically said it was for you." I smiled. "Thank you." Before I could even examine it, my mother's voice interrupted. "What is that?" I turned toward her. Apparently Grandma wanted me to have it. The color drained from Mom's face. She walked across the room much faster than normal. "Let me see." I handed it over. She stared at it without saying anything. Her fingers tightened around the edges. Then she looked directly at me. "Hannah." Her voice had changed completely. "Whatever you do." She paused. "Don't open this box." Everyone nearby stopped talking. I laughed nervously. "What?" "I'm serious." I blinked. "Why?" "Just don't." "Mom. There are things inside that should stay where they are." I frowned. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." She handed the box back almost reluctantly. "Promise me." "What am I promising?" "Promise you won't open it." The room suddenly felt strangely quiet. Even Aunt Carol was watching us. "Mom. Please." Her eyes looked frightened. Not angry. Not controlling. Afraid. That scared me, more than anything she'd actually said. "I promise." She nodded. "Thank you." That was the end of the conversation. At least, officially. Back in my apartment, I placed the box on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. I intended to forget about it. Life moved on. I went back to work. Friends invited me out. Christmas came and went. The box stayed exactly where I'd left it. Sometimes I'd notice it while grabbing a sweater. Sometimes I'd think about opening it. Then I'd remember my mother's expression. "Whatever you do, don't open that box." It wasn't just curiosity, it was the way she'd said it. Like opening the box wouldn't simply answer questions. It would destroy something. Around 2 months later, I finally asked Mom about it again. We were having lunch together. I tried sounding casual. "So?" She looked up from her salad. "So?" "Grandma's box." Her fork stopped moving. "What about it?" "Why didn't you want me opening it?" "I already told you." "No. You told me not to. You never explained why." She sighed. "Hannah, please. I don't want to talk about it." "Why?" "Because some things are better left buried." There it is again. What? Buried? You keep saying that. She looked exhausted. I mean it. I made you a promise. And I kept it. But you're acting like there's something dangerous inside. There isn't. Then why? Can we please stop? Her voice wasn't loud. It was tired. I dropped the subject. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Spring arrived. The box remained unopened. Then something happened that made everything feel different. Mom called me one Saturday morning. She almost never called before noon. Hey. Hi, sweetheart. You okay? Yes. She sounded distracted. Then she asked a question that immediately made my stomach tighten. Do you still have your grandmother's box? I sat upright. Yeah. There was a pause. Good. Why? I was thinking. Another pause. Maybe I should keep it. I frowned. What? It would probably be safer at my house. My heart started beating faster. Why now? What do you mean? You've spent months telling me not to touch it. Now suddenly you want it. I just think. She hesitated. It's the best place for it. No. Silence. No? You told me never to open it. I respected that. But now you suddenly want it? Hannah. No. I'd rather keep it. Her voice became tense. You don't understand. Then explain. I can't. Why not? I just can't. When we hung up, I stood in my bedroom staring toward the closet. For months I'd ignored the box. Now I couldn't think about anything else. If Mom was suddenly desperate to get it back, maybe Grandma wanted me to see whatever was inside before Mom could stop me. That thought stayed with me all weekend. 3 nights later, I opened it. I wish I could say I fought the temptation longer. I didn't. I carried the box to my kitchen table. The apartment felt strangely quiet. Rain tapped against the windows. I stared at the brass latch for almost 5 minutes. I'm sorry, Mom. Then I lifted it. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, everything was perfectly organized. Bundles of old letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Several photographs. A small silver key. A folded document. And an envelope with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. Not, open first. Not, instructions. Just, Hannah. I picked up the photographs first. Most were ordinary family pictures. Grandma holding Mom as a little girl. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. Old vacations. Then I reached one near the bottom. The moment I turned it over, my stomach dropped. My mother couldn't have been older than 22. She was smiling, standing beside a man I'd never seen before. His arm rested gently around her shoulders. They looked happy, comfortable, close. It definitely wasn't my father. I knew every photograph of my parents from that age. This man wasn't him. I turned the photo over. Written on the back were just 3 words. Summer, 1988. Then one name. Daniel. Nothing else. Who was Daniel? Why had Grandma kept this picture hidden? Why had Mom reacted so strongly to this box? Questions flooded my mind. I searched through the remaining photographs. There he was again. Daniel beside my mother. Daniel laughing with Grandma. Daniel helping carry Christmas presents. Daniel sitting at our family's old dining table. That stopped me cold. He wasn't just someone Mom had dated. He looked like family, yet I'd never heard his name once in my entire life. I picked up one of the letters. Before I unfolded it, my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally I answered. Hi. Her breathing sounded uneven. Hannah. What? You still haven't opened the box? It wasn't really a question. I looked down at the photograph still lying on my table. I answered honestly. I have now. The silence that followed lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard something I'd never heard from my mother before. She started crying. Real crying. Not quiet tears. The kind that came from somewhere deep. Hannah. You weren't supposed to see him. I looked back at the photograph. Who is Daniel? She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered something that made every hair on my arms stand up. He was never supposed to exist. And before I could ask another question, she hung up. I stared at my phone for several seconds, trying to understand what my mother had just told me. He was never supposed to exist. Who says something like that about another human being? My first thought was that Daniel had died young. My second thought was that maybe he'd done something terrible. But neither explanation fit the fear I'd heard in my mother's voice. She hadn't sounded angry. She'd sounded defeated. I looked back at the open wooden box sitting on my kitchen table. The photograph was still lying beside it. My mother looked genuinely happy standing next to Daniel. It wasn't the smile people force for a camera. It was relaxed, comfortable. Whatever Daniel had been to her, he'd clearly mattered. So why had my entire family erased him? I reached for the bundle of letters, tied with the faded blue ribbon. If Grandma had wanted me to know something, maybe she'd left the answers here. I carefully untied the ribbon. Most of the letters were addressed to my grandmother, Eleanor. Some were holiday cards. Some were handwritten notes from relatives I'd heard of but never met. Then I found one, with no envelope. It was folded neatly into thirds. Across the top, in faded blue ink, were the words, "For Eleanor, if anything ever happens." I unfolded it. The handwriting wasn't my grandmother's. It matched the name on the back of the photograph. Daniel. My hands actually shook. The letter wasn't long. He thanked my grandmother for believing the truth when nobody else would. He wrote that he hoped one day Claire would forgive herself. Claire, my mother. Near the end, one sentence stood out. Please don't let Hannah grow up believing the lie. I stopped breathing for a second. My name. He knew my name. How? The letter wasn't dated, but the paper looked old. Very old. Long before I was born. That didn't make any sense. I read it again. There it was. Hannah, not another name. Mine. I searched for more pages, thinking maybe something was missing, but there weren't any, just that single sheet. The questions multiplied instead of shrinking. How could a man I'd never heard of know my name decades before I was born? Unless... No, that wasn't possible. I called my Aunt Carol. She answered on the third ring. Hannah, everything okay? I need to ask you something. You sound upset. Who's Daniel? Silence. Not confusion. Silence. I heard her breathing. Finally she asked quietly, Where did you hear that name? I found Grandma's box. Another long pause. Oh. You knew. I knew there was a box. You knew about Daniel. She sighed heavily. I hoped your mother would have told you before this happened. Told me what? I can't. Please. Hannah. I promised your grandmother I wouldn't lie to you. Hope flickered. Then tell me. But I also promised your mother I wouldn't be the one to explain it. I rubbed my forehead. So, everyone made promises except me. I know. Do you know how frustrating this is? I do. Then help me. She hesitated. Finally she said, If you want answers, read every single paper in that box before you talk to anyone else. Why? Because your grandmother knew exactly how this conversation would happen. What does that mean? It means she trusted that once you knew enough, you'd ask the right questions. Before hanging up, Aunt Carol added one sentence that stayed with me. Don't assume Daniel is the villain. Then she ended the call. That surprised me. Until then, I'd unconsciously assumed he must have done something awful. Why else would my family erase him? Now, I wasn't so sure. I spent the next 2 hours reading everything inside the box. There were receipts, old Christmas cards, birthday notes, hospital paperwork. Nothing dramatic. Until I unfolded the final document. It wasn't a letter. It was a copy of a court filing. Most of the legal language meant nothing to me. But one line made my stomach tighten. Petition to amend birth record. Birth record? I kept reading. The names had been partially blacked out. Not with marker. With age. The ink had faded, almost completely. But I could still read one sentence. The biological father's information shall remain sealed. I read it 3 more times. Biological father. My pulse quickened. I immediately thought of my own birth certificate. Then, I stopped myself. No. That would be ridiculous. My dad was my dad. He'd raised me. He taught me to ride a bike. He came to every soccer game. He cried at my college graduation. There wasn't any mystery there. Was there? I barely slept that night. The next morning, Mom knocked on my apartment door. I hadn't invited her. When I opened it, she looked exhausted. She'd clearly been crying. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she looked past me. The box. It's inside. Can I have it? I crossed my arms. No. Pain crossed her face. Hannah. You've had my whole life to tell me the truth. I was trying to protect you. From what? She looked at the floor. The past. No. From yourself. Her eyes filled with tears again. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She stepped inside. For several minutes we simply sat across from each other in silence. Finally she noticed the photograph on the coffee table. She picked it up carefully. Her thumb brushed across Daniel's face. I loved him. The words came so quietly, I almost missed them. You did? She nodded. He was the kindest person I'd ever known. Then why erase him? I didn't want to. Then who did? She closed her eyes. My father. I blinked. My grandfather? He controlled everything. He hated Daniel. Why? Because Daniel came from the wrong family. I frowned. What does that mean? They were poor. They moved constantly. They weren't respectable. The bitterness in her voice surprised me. My father cared more about appearances than people. She stared at the photograph. When he learned, I wanted to marry Daniel. She couldn't finish. I waited. He threatened to disown me. What happened? I chose my family. She laughed bitterly. The worst decision I've ever made. I looked at her carefully. So you never saw Daniel again? She looked away. I did. Once? What happened? I told him goodbye. My chest tightened. And? I didn't know I was pregnant. The room seemed to tilt. What? She nodded slowly. I found out a few weeks later. I couldn't speak. She looked directly at me. I never got the chance to tell him. I whispered. So. She finished the sentence for me. Daniel was your biological father. Everything inside me went completely still. No. I'm sorry. No. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped over. You're lying. I wish I were. My dad. Your dad is the man who raised you. He loves you. He chose you. But, Daniel. She broke down crying. Daniel never even knew you existed. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I managed one question. Why did Grandma leave me the box? Mom wiped away tears. Because she disagreed with what happened. She wanted to tell you years ago. I wouldn't let her. Why? Because I was terrified. Terrified of what? That you'd think your father wasn't enough. I thought about the man who'd tucked me into bed every night, who'd taught me to drive, who'd proudly introduce me as his daughter every chance he got. Nothing about this changed that. But he knew? Mom nodded. He knew before we got married. He still married me. He signed your birth certificate. He adopted you legally before your first birthday. The word hit me differently now. Adopted. Not because he'd had to, because he'd wanted to. I started crying, not because I'd lost a father, because I'd suddenly realized I'd had two men who loved me in different ways. One never got the chance. The other spent his entire life making sure I never felt that absence. Mom reached into the wooden box. There was one envelope neither of us had opened. My name was written across the front. She looked surprised. "I've never seen this." Neither had I. I carefully opened it. Inside was Grandma's final letter. "Hannah, if you're reading this, then the truth finally reached you. I didn't leave you this box to destroy your family. I left it so you would never confuse secrets with love. Your mother made impossible choices while she was very young. She has carried the guilt every day since. Your father, yes, the man who raised you, is one of the finest men I've ever known. Never let this truth lessen what he gave you. But Daniel deserved to be remembered. No one deserves to be erased. Love is complicated. Silence only makes it heavier. Forgive where you can. Remember everyone." By the time I finished reading, both of us were crying. A week later, Mom took me to a small cemetery 2 towns away. There, beneath an old oak tree, was a simple headstone. Daniel Carter. He'd died in a car accident when I was 3 years old. He'd never known he had a daughter. Mom placed fresh flowers beside the grave. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have been braver." I stood beside her in silence. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just a mystery. He was a person. Someone who had laughed in those photographs. Someone Grandma had refused to let history erase. A month later, I finally told my dad everything. I expected anger. Instead, he smiled sadly. "I wondered when you'd find out." "You knew I'd eventually learn?" He nodded. "Your grandmother wasn't very good at keeping important things hidden." I laughed through my tears. "Were you afraid I'd stop seeing you as my dad?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Hannah," he put a hand on my shoulder. "I've been your dad every single day of your life. Nothing in a box changes that." I hugged him harder than I ever had before. Today, the wooden box sits on a shelf in my living room. Not hidden, not locked away. Sometimes, my mom notices it when she visits. She no longer asks me to put it away. Instead, she'll smile sadly at the photograph of Daniel and quietly say, "He had your smile." For years, everyone thought the secret was protecting our family. It wasn't. The secret was the thing keeping us apart. The truth hurt. But the truth also gave every person in that story, including Daniel, the place they deserved in our family's history. And I think that's exactly what Grandma Eleanor hoped would happen when she left that small wooden box to me.